Hi, this is Leora Lanz, and you're listening to Marketing Mindset Lessons from Hospitality, the podcast where I speak with some of my amazing friends throughout the global landscape of hospitality and marketing. We will share best practices that you can use in your business, whether it's in traditional hospitality or not, whether you are an emerging leader in the industry, or seasoned and wanting to stay fresh and always learning. If you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, you need a marketing mindset. Whether you're marketing a business or yourself, we all need a marketing mindset. We know you're busy, but take a listen and figure out how you can apply this fresh thinking to your world, both professional and personal. Let's all think like a marketer. Hi, everyone, and we are back with another conversation for the Marketing Mindset Podcast, Lessons from Hospitality. This is Leora, and I'm excited to bring yet another guest to talk about a specific nuance of marketing and how we can apply it in our world of hospitality. Just a reminder, Marketing Mindset is the name of the book series that I authored in 2025 and in 2026, Developing Your Marketing Mindset, Real World Lessons from Hospitality, and Marketing Mindset in Motion, inspired by hospitality, which I know all of us will really appreciate these stories told in the voices of former students with real hospitality businesses, real marketing lessons that we can apply in hospitality or in any industry where experiences matter, where guest connection matters, and where people and profit matter. So today we're going to talk about something really interesting. It's new for me this term, called the catalytic customer. What does that mean? So in a moment, we're going to bring in Paul Peterson. Paul is the founder of CoinJar Insights and Strategy, which is a customer insights and innovation consultancy. It helps product, marketing, and leadership teams make better decisions by learning from the right customers. We're going to talk about what that all means. He's the author of a book called The Catalytic Customer, which introduces a practical framework for identifying the customers whose experience, judgment, and category fluency can reveal what a broader customer feedback can often obscure. How do we get to the nitty-gritty and the details? Over more than 3 decades in research and strategy, Paul has helped organizations uncover deeper customer insight, make smarter innovation decisions, and identify opportunities for growth. Marketing. Let's bring in Paul Peterson to talk about the catalytic customer.
Hello.
Hi, Paul. Welcome. I'm
Nice
so
to see
happy
you.
to chat with you, and it's good to see you again, too. First of all, CoinJar Insights and Strategy. Love the name. I'm so curious. How did we get to this name? What was the background behind it to get you to CoinJar and then to lead to Catalytic? So let's start with CoinJar first.
All right. So it was CoinJar is a new company. I founded it about a little over almost 3 years ago now, I guess.
Okay.
I had been running a full service market research firm for about 20 years prior to that, and realized that the market was changing, and that's really began some of my thinking. It was actually in my previous job that I'd spent a lot of time thinking about and developing the concept of catalytic customers, but CoinJar was sort of the first. Let me put aside the old ways of doing things and start something new. The term came from a couple of things. One is my own history with coin jars and saving things and trying to prepare for things and accumulate assets and all that kind of stuff. Sure. It also had a very poignant meaning at that point of transition, because one of the things that I did was, I think, hung on to a lot of the traditional methods and approaches and customer insights and market research far longer than I should have, and invested a whole lot of money in the old way of doing things. And by the time I closed down my old company and started up my new one, my starting point was really a very large jar of coins. I mean, that was really what I had. My picture of it on my website, it's the real jar. And I stared at it thinking, okay, I'm starting afresh. Much like I did in my original career, I started moving to New York with $100 in my wallet, and that was my starting point. I started again over 3 years ago, but with a whole new focus and a new approach that is proving to be quite effective.
Well, I love that. And I think all of us can relate to having that coin jar, to have our savings, to reach our dreams and our goals.
Yeah.
And if we don't start and save a little bit at a time to get there, how else do we get it done? So I think it's actually a very meaningful name for your company. And I really wanted to ask about the history of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Now, the term catalytic customer. You wrote a book about this.
I did.
That's the basic idea behind the book, but behind your term of the catalytic customer. What are you
Yeah.
trying to tell us?
Well, I had spent, as I said, I spent my entire career, now almost 40 years, in customer insights. I was in advertising, working in a market research department. I've spent a lot of time as a supplier to companies of all sizes, talking about, advocating for customers. I had seen the whole transition from how customer insights and data around that were scarce to being just
Overwhelmed with data. Yeah.
Overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
And in the process, however, decision making, innovation, sort of the use of customer insights and real customer centricity hadn't improved. That in fact, it became my thesis, and I still believe it, that too much information, too much data can actually stymie decisions, get people to it confuse
Take the wrong
decisions.
Yeah.
And this is where the catalytic customer thing comes in. What tends to happen is people start making really safe decisions, right? The more data I have, the more I've got this accumulated middle ground kind of understanding of a market, like safe bets and things like that. And while that is not, that's dismissing the importance of that.
Okay.
It's not in the middle that new ideas and innovation and forward thinking progress gets made. It really is at the edges. In other
words, it's sort of that middle ground from these surveys in general really give you, I don't want to say average, but it gives us sort of the average. But how do we get inspired by those who are sort of, maybe I'm thinking of like a net promoter score system, if they're not necessarily our fan base at one end of the spectrum, and then our real loyalists and brand advocates at the other end. What can we learn from those who don't want to hear from us, and maybe they're not actually our customer? And then what do we hear from those who love us so that it can keep us going and moving forward? Is that what I'm hearing? It's like, how do we get that kind of insight?
Yeah, roughly. So yes, I think that's that. So first off, I should say, the phenomenon that I've now described as the catalytic customer, I'm not the first to have seen it, witnessed it, experienced it, right? My contribution to it is to provide the way to get to them and think about them and find them. But what in my experience, what I had seen, I'm a trained focus group moderator, qualitative interviewer. I spent a lot of them, hours and hours talking to people. And there was an experience that happened over and over again where there'd be that one person in a series of interviews or that one person in a focus group who really just got it. They would say something and it would be like, yes, that's what I've been thinking. And that's what I've been trying to understand. Like, I want to get to that. And we used to kind of just write those people as happenstance, happy accidents. Like, yes, it was great that we found one of those.
Yes.
But it happened over with the frequency that I thought there's got to be something here. That if we could find those people and really focus on those, particularly when it comes to things like trying to improve things, trying to develop new campaigns, develop better messaging, new products, better services, where you're really focused on where things should be going. If we could get to those catalytic customers, I call them, if we could get to those, imagine how much that would jumpstart our whole process, right?
It's almost like having someone else on the R&D team for us.
Exactly.
Because you're getting a little jolt. So it's not necessarily the extremes like I was trying to figure out earlier. So forgive my naivete.
Yeah.
But it's really those that are willing to come up with something a little bit extra to take us a little bit further, or some other insight that we may not have thought of.
Yeah. So and these are not, again, there's all kinds of, in marketing, of course, there's all kinds of interrelated concepts and things that are near and around. Here's how I think about them. The catalytic customers have, now I've called them sort of three major characteristics. I call it engagement, enablement, disposition. But basically it comes down to, these are people in a category who really they're highly engaged in the category. They have experience with your competitors' products. They've usually been around for some time. They like being in the category. They have opinions that are based on lived experience, right? So that's the engagement part of it. Then there's the enablement part of it, which is they have the wherewithal and the resources to actively participate in a category and make choices. And it's that they make real trade-offs when they're thinking about things, and they pay for them, or they afford them, or they try them, or they experiment with them. So they're enabled to be in the category and active in a way that's not just hypothetical.
Okay.
And then the third is kind of a psychographic profile, and a little bit probably the hardest to kind of screen for, but they are people who I call they're constructively critical. They aren't complainers and whiners. They do complain, and they don't whine, but they do complain. They do point out what's wrong and what needs to be improved, but they do it with this constructive attitude. They really want to work with you to make things happen in a better way for everybody. So engagement, enablement, and disposition, if you combine those three kinds of things, that becomes what I call a catalytic customer. And then the term comes from the notion of, science and chemistry, but it's, they catalyze change. They're the ones who actually move things forward and can help companies in an accelerated way get to kind of where they should be.
Love that. Love the term for it. And boy, does that really give us perspective about how so many of us just consider brands using these big general feedbacks. And the truth is, it's the qualitative stuff that we really need to pay attention to get a little bit more insight to help catalyze our brand to go into the future and to keep moving forward. Great. You mentioned something earlier about overwhelmed with data. We're now, you've seen this evolution of no data and making decisions. I've seen it too in hospitality, to too much data. Have you seen examples where brands or companies have taken that data and taken stuff seriously that they shouldn't have taken seriously, or they're not serious enough with information that they should? Because it's very hard when there's such an overwhelming amount of information. How do you know what to act on?
Yeah.
What do you advise there when you talk to brands or to companies?
Yeah. Well, first off, I mean, I do want to make the point, and I do this with my clients too, is I'm not dismissive of the available data out there. You should use it. You should look at it. You should understand it, right? It is, we are blessed with this huge amount of data, and the answers are in there somewhere.
Okay.
The challenge is, and actually when you're modeling or planning things or thinking about sort of widespread adoption, it's important sometimes to actually really look at the broad amount of data and look at the averages and look at the patterns and all that kind of stuff. My argument is that that's not where new ideas come from. That's the assurance and safety and sanity check.
Right.
But it's not where new things originate, because it tends to be the average customer has average needs, which is fine, but they're not pushing things. And so the one risk is what we talked about, is kind of deferring to this kind of middle or average type of customer. The other thing that happens, I see a lot of, and I'm sure it plays out in hospitality as well, we often pay attention to the squeakiest wheels, the loudest complainers, the customers who are the most obstinate about getting their point across.
Yeah.
And those people are rarely representative of the mainstream. They have a personal agenda. They have something they want you to change or do. And what I often see is there's just too much time and attention to those, the loudest complainer, the biggest account in a B2B situation, somebody, the biggest client. And it can actually channel your efforts in ways that diminish your appeal to the mainstream, right? Because now you're solving a problem, just for one person or one talent or one client, right?
Okay, Paul, you just told us about a loud customer. You and I have had this conversation. You actually make a distinction between what you call a loud customer, a loyal customer, a high value customer, and then the catalytic customer.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a number of different types of people that companies learn from, right? And in hospitality, I would imagine, I mean, I do some work in hospitality, the loyal customer becomes one of the key inputs, right? They're absolutely high value customers. Marketing to your loyal customer by all means, that, that's what sustains your business and sustains the economics of your business. Loyal customers, though, are already bought into you, right? They are loyal for a reason. They're advocates for you. You've satisfied their needs. So again, getting back to the sources of innovation and novel new things, loyal customers aren't usually well set up to do that. They're going to tell you things are good. They want to reinforce all the things that you're already doing well. They are not the people who are going to be overly attuned to or dialed into
constructive commentary.
Exactly, where you should be going, what the future, and one of the things that distinguishes a loyal customer from a catalytic customer. Loyal customers are bought into you. So typically their reference frame of reference, their point of reference is you and your services. Catalytic customers, by definition, and I observed this over and over again, are rarely loyal to any category or any brand.
Oh,
they
interesting.
Because their whole orientation is to look at the options available and adopt those that meet their needs. They're utility focused, they're usefulness and application focused. And that often leads them to be a little, I call it sometimes brand promiscuous.
Okay.
Right?
They flirt around with other brands.
Yeah, because they're going to go with whatever brand or product meets their needs best, which isn't great if you think of them as a customer. But if you think of them or use them for their lived insights, their experience with their competitors, they're hugely valuable, and they are eager to share their opinions, and it's informed by not just you, but the other choices that are available.
I love that. So if I can paraphrase, does that mean the catalytic customer may not, and perhaps is likely not, your loyal customer, but it's the customer who can give you the constructive insight for taking the brand forward?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, okay, great. That's a great clarification and distinction. So I really appreciate that. So Paul, we talked about our different customers that you identified. Is there a piece of feedback that you might have gotten from a catalytic customer that sticks with you? Is there anything? I'm sure you've gotten a lot of great feedback over the years with your brands and your companies and clients, but is there anything that sort of stands out as, oh, wow, that's good?
Yes, I mean, often the most memorable stuff that comes out of catalytic customer work is a choice quote. Somebody just says something and the light goes on, right? So we were doing this project talking about sort of the role of automation and AI in service delivery.
Okay.
And, one of the catalytic customers that we were talking to really just succinctly summarized the real point, which was, I think his phrase was something along the lines of, if all the automation's doing is shifting the burden of the work from you, the company or the brand, to me, then it's failed. It is not.
You're making it harder on me, the customer, and you want my input. So that's what.
And that really, the client heard that and it was like, yes, absolutely, that is exactly right. We've got to start thinking of, again, in customer terms, not in efficiency terms, or how do we reduce costs or things like that. It's really, what are we doing to use this stuff in such a way that it actually propels customer, adoption, interest, support, etc.
It's a great quote. Great quote. Now, speaking of moving forward, and everybody's talking AI, so have you had examples, whether it's with clients or you've seen cases where that catalytic customer can actually help a brand think a little bit more clearly about moving forward, using technology, AI to help evolve it? Have you seen some specific examples that you could share with us about how that customer can be helpful in that regard too?
Yeah. I think it's important to start with, the idea that AI is rapidly evolving and anybody who knows exactly how it's all going to play out,
won't know it tomorrow. Right.
And
Yeah.
so my perspective on this is informed by sort of where it is right now and its uses and how it's being used and thought about right now. I don't propose that I'm an expert in where it's going, but what we see, well, there's a couple of things too. Like there's AI as a source of information, and then
Okay.
there's AI as a component of your product or service delivery and the experience that customers have, right? So I think it's, AI as a source of information, as insights. It is actually part of the reason I closed down the old company. All the stuff that used to fund our day-to-day operation was often the exploratory research, the lay of the land, the category understanding, the market landscape, right? Which clients in the old days, when data were more scarce, would pay us to gather and analyze and report on.
Okay.
All of that can really be done to a satisfactory level with AI now. A prompt or a query gives you the basics. So all that funding that we used to get from let's understand the category is being done,
Substituted with technology now.
yeah, somebody in
Okay.
a split second goes to Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, and they
You
get
can
the
get that
information they need.
information, right?
So
Although let me clarify that people need to check it. Just because it's coming out of the AI doesn't mean we have to take it at face value. We
yes,
still need to do our due diligence to make sure it's correct.
completely agree, and that's why I say
Okay.
to a level of satisfaction. It's not always
Right.
accurate, but at least it gets. If you're just looking for the kind of basic lay of the land, it gets you that.
Okay.
But again, it is AI is largely, it's an expert at pattern recognition, and it's ingested, for sake of argument, the world's knowledge, but
Right.
it's all of the here and now and where things have been. It is not, and again, you can model some things, you can predict some things, but it really doesn't have the human experience that a customer might, that would give you a view of where things could go or might go. So where I don't discount, I use AI, we all do.
Right.
It's a very important tool, but I recommend to my clients, like, okay, let's actually now layer in a catalytic customer perspective in all of this, because you need the human experience, the human lived experience, in addition to that foundational knowledge you're getting from AI. So
Right.
as a source of insights, it's a good starting point, but it doesn't serve all needs. AI as a tool for delivering something to customers, products or
A
services.
guest experience or
A guest
product.
experience,
Okay.
right? What we have seen, and I'm trying to figure out how to share information without divulging anything.
Fair enough.
My
Just say
client would not want me to.
a particular brand needed
Yeah, but
something.
let's make it. I'll sort of make it at least kind of hypothetical based on some
Okay.
reality. But let's just take a hotel experience to
Okay.
where there is clearly a role for automation and new technology and things like that in improving aspects of
The operational efficiency.
operation, the guest experience, et cetera. What we have seen is that the catalytic customers that we've identified and interviewed for those kinds of projects will often say there is not a one-size-fits-all technology solution, right? That somebody might want just speed of check-in and getting to the right thing right away. Somebody's might be really driven more by proactive notification of price decreases or availability of new rooms, things like that. So
right.
What we heard in a project that we did was essentially the catalytic customers saying what you might think about in leveraging AI is more predictive capability of what I need as a customer, right? So I'm, you can tell from my behavior that I'm really just economy focused. I just want to, I don't want to deal with a human being. I want to get the lowest price. I want to just get in and get out and not interact. Others might be really looking for more of a, luxurious experience. And you can tell that from my interaction with your digital properties and things like that. But where AI could play a role, these catalytic customers suggested, is in understanding from my behavior, my interaction with your digital presence, what kind of customer I am, and then serving it up that way. So it's not wow, we just automated the check-in process. It is, wow, we've served this person with these kinds of experiences, and this person with this kind of experiences based on what the AI is seeing in their behavioral patterns.
So it's a bit of predictive work, right?
It is
It's
predictive, yeah.
And that's what the catalytic customer that you talk to, or customers who you
Yes.
spoke with on behalf of a brand,
Mhm.
shared with you in this particular case.
Yeah.
What kind of insights, where could the AI actually become
Mhm.
part of their next experience with that brand?
Right.
Wow. Incredible. Paul, just to sort of wrap things up now, do you have 2 or 3 key takeaways? And well, actually, let me get to your book.
Okay.
Your book is The Catalytic Customer. Where can people find the book? And what do you want us to know about your mission with the book?
Yeah.
Where can they
Yeah.
find it?
Well, the book can be found virtually anywhere, Amazon, any online retailer of books, you can find it. It is
Fantastic.
available.
What did you
So-
want us to learn with your book? Why did you put that together?
Yeah. So some of it was an interesting process. There was a selfish process and a selfless process in there. I started writing it around the time that I opened CoinJar Insights. And I had been playing with this idea of catalytic customers for a long time, but I really used the process of writing the book to really be clear on my point of view, what I really wanted to take away. And I wrote it in a way that is deliberately intended to be a useful handbook, right? So here's the concept. I have to explain the concept, differentiate the concept from other similar related marketing concepts. And
Sure.
then I kind of went through a process of how do you actually, if you buy into this, how do you use them, what purpose, and then, how do you actually find them? So the work that I do now at CoinJar is literally consulting with clients on helping them identify and leverage their catalytic customers.
That's fantastic.
And that's, so it's intended to be useful. And I'm finding that, it is actually being quite useful for the clients that have been working.
That's fantastic. Well, I will say I relate to that, as you and I have talked about in previous conversations in authors groups that we belong to. I wrote the book selfishly originally as a documentation of my teachings here at the university. It turned into a love letter to the students who helped contribute to it and to all of them. And I ended up learning things as a result of the writing that I didn't even realize I was putting into my content. So how I talk about my book today really evolved because I documented it. And so I understand that, and I really appreciate it. And I too was given the guidance to make it a useful, workable, sort of a handbook or a workbook of some sort, where the content and the stories were there, but each chapter ends with questions that a client can ask themselves to be conscious marketers. So we're marketing with meaning. So I really love that about the catalytic customer. Congrats on the book. And tell us, Paul, what 2 or 3 things do you want folks who are listening to us now or watching this, however they're getting this information from us, what do you want them to take away from? I mean, you taught me a lot new about this, just even framing the catalytic customer and why we need these individuals and the human element to support the technological and the general feedback. But what do you want us to know from your book or from your own work that you think would be very helpful going forward in hospitality or in any business?
Yeah. Well, I think, as I said, my entire career has been advocating for customers, pushing companies to be more customer centric, right? And these days, virtually every company I've ever interacted with aspires to being customer centric, says they are customer centric, puts the customer at the center, et cetera, et cetera. What I would like ultimately people to begin to understand is that customer centricity isn't just listening to everybody. That customer centricity is finding the meaningful stuff that customers are saying in such a way that you can then develop products and services that meet their needs, right? So I am now, interestingly, arguing against hey, get as much data as you can to let's really focus on the signal, because now there is so much noise out there. There's so much data, and I see it over and over again that product teams, decision makers get lost in it, and they're trying to address every need, every data point. Customer centricity, in my current thinking, is really finding the people that are going to help you develop products that ultimately the broad audiences need and want, to benefit the broader populations that you're trying to serve.
So as part of these takeaways, what do you recommend for us to find those folks? Can you give me 2 or 3 criteria? How do we find those folks?
Well, there are a number of ways. So interestingly, I mean, there's a couple things I want to add to that. They can be found almost anywhere in every category. They're specific to the category.
Okay.
What a catalytic customer is in hospitality, it might be very different from what a catalytic customer is in enterprise IT, right?
Right. I mean, it could be somebody who books a conference. It could be somebody who's booking a wedding. It could be somebody who's traveling with girlfriends, or just an individual solo traveler, right? So you've got already a whole mix of why people are traveling.
So there are a number of things that we recommend looking at. One is, most companies now have a fairly large CRM or a large database. So there are signals and markers in those data that are worth looking for.
Okay.
I don't think that's sufficient, because there also needs to be some kind of screening. But we look at, so what I recommend is a number of things. Look at your CRM. Let's look for the flags and the signals. Let's look at your call center logs, and the people who are actually calling in, but not to complain, calling in with suggestions, and try to identify those people. And then I always, because I come from the world of market research, supplement with a primary screening questionnaire, where we really are, there's a subset of about 9 to 12 kind of questions that I typically ask that just confirm, yes, this person is what I would characterize as a catalytic customer. So that's the finding. And then it's really about engaging. How do you do it? So it can be episodic. I just happen to do a research project, but I want to focus it on catalytic customers. I'm working with a very large media company at the moment, where we're actually setting up for them an ongoing catalytic customer panel, so they can continue to evolve their ad services products and things like that.
Amazing.
So there's those kinds of things. And sometimes it's just, I'm working with one client where we're going to bring in a series of catalytic customers. This is an insurance company. But bringing in some catalytic customers just for a one-day workshop with their innovation team. So you can engage in any number of ways. So you asked about my key takeaways. One is, they can be found, and you need to be customer centric. You should be focused on a certain small subset of people.
Okay.
The second, which is related to this workshop idea, is you also have to be open to hearing stuff that may not be always
something
pleasant.
Right.
As I said, catalytic customers aren't complainers, but they are going to be critics. And I find they're best engaged when the client is open to input, when they don't feel, I work with some clients that don't feel, especially in the technology world, that don't feel like customers are ever going to be able to tell them anything that their engineers don't already know. But you have to be open to it. So the second theme is, really be open to criticism, be open to don't be so wedded to your point of view and what you've committed to that you aren't bringing in, or aren't open to what the market's saying to you through catalytic customers. And then I guess the third point is really, I think it's really important, if companies truly are committed to customer centricity, to making this a systemic way of doing things, right?
This is not just a one-time, let's
not
do
a one-off.
focus group.
Right.
Let's do this on a periodic basis and maybe rotate departments, or however it is that we're doing this, but we make this an ongoing, constant part of the DNA of who we are as a brand. Love that. That was great. Thank you, Paul. That was great. Very motivating, very inspiring. Get your copy of the book, get Marketing Mindset, get Catalytic Customer. And thank you for joining me for this conversation today. I'm really, really grateful. Thanks for taking the time.
Truly my pleasure. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Marketing Mindset, Lessons from Hospitality. Marketing Mindset is a production of Think Tank Media and the Hospitality Nexus, the global platform for hospitality education, with resources such as podcasts, articles, and video tutorials. I'm your host, Leora Lanz, and if you want to learn more about how we can work together, visit my LinkedIn at Leora Lanz. Remember to order a copy of my debut book, the international bestseller, Developing Your Marketing Mindset, Real-World Lessons from Hospitality, which also won the Business Book of 2025 award from the New England Book Festival. And the newest in the series, the companion book, Marketing Mindset in Motion, inspired by hospitality. Everything you need to think like a marketer for your business, your service, or yourself. Connect with meaning through wellness, sustainability, and community to market with meaning and remember the hospitality. Until next time.